4 teenagers went camping by a peaceful Finnish lake. 3 never came home. The survivor couldn't remember what happened. Welcome to Chalk and Silence. Real crimes, real mysteries, real unsolved stories that were waiting in the dark. If you're new here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, since it helps keep these stories alive. Lake Bodom sits just outside Helsinki, Finland. 3 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide. In 1960, it was the kind of place where Finnish teenagers would escape for weekend camping trips. The water was crystal clear. Pine forests stretched endlessly in every direction. On warm summer evenings, you could hear laughter echoing across the water as young couples set up their tents along the shoreline. June 4th, 1960 was a Saturday. 4 teenagers decided to spend the night by the lake. Mila Björklund and Anja Mäki, both 15. Their boyfriends, Seppo Boisman and Nils Gustafsson, both 18. They rode motorcycles to the water's edge, set up a single tent, made a small fire, talked and laughed as the sun disappeared behind the trees. By midnight, the forest had gone completely silent. The only sounds were gentle waves lapping against the rocky shore and the soft breathing of 4 young people sleeping peacefully in their tent. None of them knew that someone was watching from the darkness between the trees. Sometime between 4 and 6 a.m., while the teenagers were still deep in sleep, the attack began. The killer didn't enter the tent. Instead, they used a knife to slash through the canvas from the outside, stabbing blindly at the bodies within. They cut the tent ropes, causing the entire structure to collapse on top of the victims. Then they used a blunt object, probably a rock, to finish what the knife had started. Mila Björklund, Nils's girlfriend, somehow ended up outside the collapsed tent. She was found undressed from the waist down. The killer had stabbed her repeatedly, many of the wounds inflicted after she was already dead. Inside the tent, Seppo and Anja had been butchered through the canvas, but Nils Gustafsson was still breathing. His jaw was broken, his face smashed, deep stab wounds across his body. He was unconscious, bleeding heavily, but alive. The killer took their wallets, stole some of their clothes, grabbed the keys to their motorcycles but left the bikes behind. Then they walked 500 meters into the forest and carefully hid Nils's shoes before disappearing forever. Around 6 a.m., a group of young birdwatchers spotted something strange in the distance. The tent had collapsed. A blond man was walking away from the campsite, but they didn't investigate. They were too far away to see clearly, and they had no idea what they were really witnessing. 5 hours later, a carpenter named Esko Johansson was walking through the area when he stumbled upon the scene. 3 bodies, blood everywhere, 1 survivor barely clinging to life. When police arrived at noon, they made a decision that would haunt this case for the next 65 years. They didn't secure the crime scene. Officers, officials, and curious bystanders trampled through the area, destroying footprints, disturbing evidence, contaminating everything they touched. They called in soldiers to help search for the missing items. But all these untrained searchers did was make it impossible to distinguish between evidence and random forest debris. The murder weapons were never found. The stolen items mostly lost forever. The killer's trail obliterated by dozens of boots crushing through the pine needles and muddy shoreline. When Nils Gustafsson finally woke up in the hospital, he had no memory of the attack. He could only remember a nightmare image. A figure in black with bright red eyes coming toward them in the darkness. Without physical evidence, the investigation turned to suspects. And over the decades, 3 men would emerge as the primary candidates. First was Carl Gillström, known locally as the Kioskman. He ran a small shop near the lake and was notorious for his violent hatred of campers. He would cut down their tents, throw rocks at families, scream at children. Before he died, Gillström allegedly confessed to a neighbor while drunk, "I killed them." Some locals claimed they saw him walking back from the direction of the murder scene that morning, but were too afraid of him to report it to police. Days after the murders, witnesses watched him fill in a well on his property. When police finally searched it, they found nothing. Gillström's wife provided him with an alibi, claiming he was home all night. But years later, on her deathbed, she recanted. She said he hadn't been home, and he'd threatened to kill her if she ever told the truth. In 1969, Carl Gillström walked into Lake Bodom and drowned himself. The second suspect was Hans Assmann, a German-born Finnish citizen with rumors of a dark past. Some whispered he'd been a Nazi. Others claimed he was a KGB spy. The morning after the bodies were discovered, Assmann showed up at Helsinki Surgical Hospital. His fingernails were black with dirt. His clothes were covered in red stains. Hospital staff said he was acting extremely nervous and aggressive. At one point, he even faked losing consciousness. The doctors insisted the stains on his clothes were blood, but police never confiscated them for testing. They questioned him briefly and let him go. When news reports described the blonde man seen leaving the crime scene, Assmann immediately cut his distinctive long blonde hair. Dr. Jorma Palo, one of the physicians who examined Assmann that day, became convinced he was the killer. Palo wrote 3 books linking Assmann to the Bodom murders and 5 other unsolved homicides. Assmann eventually moved to Sweden, where he died in the late 1990s, reportedly confessing to 1 murder on his deathbed. The third suspect was Pentti Soininen, who confessed to the murders while serving time in prison in the mid-1960s. But investigators dismissed him because he was only 14 years old at the time of the killings. For 44 years, the case remained cold. The 3 suspects were all dead. The physical evidence was contaminated beyond use. The lone survivor still had no memory of that night. But in 2004, everything changed. The Finnish National Bureau of Investigation announced they were reopening the case using modern DNA technology. What they found shocked the entire country. Blood from all 3 murder victims was on Nils Gustafsson's shoes, the ones found hidden 500 meters from the tent in 1960. But Gustafsson's own blood was completely absent from the shoes. In March 2004, police arrested the 62-year-old survivor. After 44 years of being seen as the tragic victim who couldn't remember, Nils Gustafsson was now accused of being the killer. The prosecution's theory was devastating in its simplicity. They claimed Gustafsson had been drunk and jealous. Maybe the others had excluded him from the tent. He got into a violent argument with his girlfriend Mila, killed her in a rage, then murdered the other 2 to eliminate witnesses. The extreme brutality inflicted on Mila, they argued, proved this was a crime of passion directed specifically at her. They claimed his broken jaw came from fighting with Seppo before the murders. After killing all 3, he staged the crime scene, hid his shoes, and inflicted his other wounds on himself to look like a victim. The DNA evidence from the shoes was their smoking gun. If he'd been attacked while wearing them, his own blood would be there too. Its absence, they claimed, proved he wasn't wearing them during the attack. But the defense fought back hard. They argued that a man with a concussion and multiple facial fractures couldn't have overpowered and brutally murdered 3 people. They said his injuries were far too severe to be self-inflicted. They brought out the original tent from 1960, yellowed and stained, riddled with slash marks. Blood spatter analysis showed that 7 of Seppo's stab wounds were inflicted through the tent fabric, meaning the cuts were made before the attack, not after as part of some elaborate staging. Most compelling of all, both Gustafsson's feet and his socks were found completely clean. How could he have walked 500 meters barefoot through the forest to hide his shoes without getting any dirt on his feet? On October 7, 2005, the court delivered its verdict. Not guilty. The judges cited 3 reasons. The prosecution's evidence was inconclusive. They failed to establish a credible motive for such extreme violence, and too much time had passed to determine what really happened that night. The state paid Gustafsson nearly 45,000 euros in compensation for his suffering during the trial. But the acquittal didn't end the questions. Public opinion in Finland remains divided. Many still believe Gustafsson was guilty. When asked directly about his innocence, Gustafsson's response was terse. "I'm innocent, that's that." So what really happened at Lake Bodom? The rational explanation points to an outside attacker, most likely Carl Gillström. His violent hatred of campers, his alleged confession, and his wife's deathbed recantation create a compelling case. His suicide by drowning in the very lake where the murders occurred feels like the final admission of guilt. But the psychological angle is equally haunting. Could someone truly repress such traumatic memories so completely? Gustafsson's amnesia has never wavered in 65 years. Either he's maintained an impossible lie for over half a century, or his mind genuinely locked away the horror of that night. The most unsettling possibility is that we're looking at this all wrong. What if the attack wasn't random or personal? What if there was something about that specific night, that specific location, that drew violence like a magnet? Lake Bodom has become synonymous with unsolvable mystery. The contaminated crime scene created a permanent state of reasonable doubt that no amount of modern science could overcome. The Lake Bodom murders remain officially unsolved. The killer's identity died with the last of the original suspects. But the case lives on in Finnish culture. A cautionary tale told around campfires. A real-life horror story that warns us darkness can emerge from even the most peaceful places. 4 teenagers went to sleep by a beautiful lake. 3 never woke up. And after 65 years, we still don't know who was watching them from the forest that night. What do you think happened at Lake Bodom? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to hear about more unsolved mysteries, check out our video on the Assmann of New Orleans.